the haunting lights of the Night Watchman. It was a night like any other for Thomas, the Night Watchman, as he patrolled the coastline near the sleepy town of Gulls Point. The salty sea breeze tousled his hair, and the full moon cast long shadows over the rocky shore. With each step, the sound of waves crashing against the jagged cliffs echoed through the darkness. Thomas had heard the stories about the old abandoned lights that stood sentinel just beyond the point. Where the ocean met the sky, locals whispered of a spectral light that flashed from its summit, luring hapless ships to their watery graves. Like most people, Thomas dismissed these tales as nothing more than legends, the product of overactive imaginations and too many pints at the local pub. As he approached the lights, however, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was amiss. The air grew colder, an eerie silence settled over the area. As he neared the entrance, he noticed the door was slightly ajar, its rusty hinges groaning in protest. Curiosity piqued, Thomas cautiously stepped inside. The lights were shrouded in darkness, the air thick with the scent of mildew and decay. Thomas fumbled for his flashlight, illuminating the crumbling walls and decrepit staircase that spiraled up into the shadows. As he ascended the steps, he felt the oppressive atmosphere grow heavier with each passing moment. When he reached the top, Thomas was greeted by the sight of the once great lantern, its glass shattered and its inner workings consumed by rust. He stared out into the darkness, scanning the horizon for any signs of the spectral light that the townsfolk had spoken of, and then, as if summoned by his thoughts, a ghostly beam burst forth from the lights, casting a malevolent glow over tumultuous waves. Thomas felt a chill run down his spine as he realized the legends were true. There, in the heart of the spectral light, floated the twisted, ethereal form of a long-dead sailor. The apparition's hollow eyes seemed to bore into Thomas's soul, and its voice whispered to him, telling of its insatiable hunger for the spirits of those who perished at sea. As a panicked Thomas stumbled down the staircase, desperate to escape the haunted lights. But the malevolent spirit pursued him, its presence closing in like a vice. As he reached the bottom of the stairs, he found the door slammed shut, trapping him inside the cursed building. In that moment, Thomas realized that his only chance of survival was to confront the specter and his own deepest fears. He turned to face the ghostly sailor, whose form seemed to grow more monstrous with each passing second. Mustering every ounce of courage, Thomas charged at the apparition, clutching an old iron cross he had found amongst the debris. With a guttural scream, Thomas plunged the cross into the heart of the spirit. The air was filled with a shrieking howl, and the spectral light flickered out, plunging the lights into darkness once more. The heavy atmosphere lifted, and the door creaked open, freeing Thomas from his supernatural prison. Exhausted, but alive, Thomas emerged from the haunted lights, knowing that he had vanquished the sinister force that had claimed so many lives. As the sun began to rise over Gulls Point, Thomas vowed never to doubt the legends again, for he had seen the darkness that lurked within them and had faced his own demons to overcome it. Shadows in the Timekeeper's tower. Henry had always been fascinated by the old clock tower that loomed over the small town of Dunwich. When he was offered the job of Night Watchman, he couldn't resist the opportunity to explore its secrets. Locals spoke of a mysterious timekeeping device hidden within its walls, rumored to have powers beyond comprehension. As Henry embarked on his first shift, he felt a mixture of excitement and trepidation, unaware of the darkness that awaited him. The interior of the tower was coated in dust and draped in cobwebs, giving the impression that it had been untouched for centuries. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the distant ticking of the great clock. As he ascended the spiraling staircase, Henry couldn't help but feel as if he were being watched by unseen eyes. He finally reached the chamber housing the ancient timekeeping device, a complicated array of gears and coils whirring in perpetual motion. The moment he laid eyes on the contraption, Henry felt a deep sense of unease. It was as if the device itself was alive, pulsing with an unnatural energy. As he explored further, the shadows of the clock tower began to come alive. Whispers of the past reached out to him, pulling him deeper into the tower's twisted history. The shadows began to blur with the present, showing glimpses of the tower's previous inhabitants and their horrific fates. Henry found himself face to face with the ghosts of those who had once sought the power of the timekeeping device. They were tormented souls caught in an endless loop of suffering, their bodies twisted into grotesque forms. The spirits reached out to him, begging for release from their eternal nightmare. As the boundary between the past and the present crumbled, Henry realized that he was trapped in the tower, just like the wretched souls that haunted its halls, desperate to escape the nightmarish reality that had enveloped him. Henry turned to the timekeeping device. He had heard whispers of its ability to manipulate time itself, and he hoped that it could be the key to his salvation. But as he reached out to touch the ancient machine, a deep voice echoed through the chamber, warning him of the terrible price that would be paid for meddling with time. Henry hesitated, the voices of the tormented souls ringing in his ears. He knew that to save himself, he would have to confront the darkest corners of his own mind and face the truth of his deepest fears. With a heavy heart, he steeled himself for the journey into the abyss. Hours or perhaps days passed as Henry wrestled with his own demons, grappling with the terrors that lurked within his soul. As he faced each fear, the shadows in the tower began to recede, the barrier between the past and the present slowly rebuilding itself. The spirits that haunted the tower watched in silence, their fate bound to his own. At last, Henry emerged victorious, his mind and spirit battered but unbroken. The ghosts of the tower's past acknowledged his triumph, their tortured forms fading into the darkness. The ancient timekeeping device, now dormant, stood as a testament to the horrors that had been unleashed within the clock tower's walls. Exhausted and shaken, Henry stumbled down the staircase and out of the tower, the first light of dawn illuminating his path. He knew that he could never forget the nightmare he had endured, but he also knew that he had survived, stronger for having faced the darkness within both the tower and himself. As he walked away from the clock tower, the great clock struck the hour, its chimes ringing out across the sleepy town of Dunwich, a solemn reminder of the shadows that lay hidden beneath the surface of the world. The unseen eyes of the Night Watchman. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting a gloomy shadow over the small town of Willowbrook. The sleepy community had been rocked by a string of inexplicable disappearances, leaving its residents gripped by fear. In the midst of the chaos, the local hospital had become a beacon of hope and safety for those seeking refuge from the unknown. Jack, the Night Watchman, was a newcomer to the town, hired to protect the hospital and its inhabitants from the unseen dangers lurking in the darkness. He was a seasoned professional, but even he couldn't ignore the unsettling atmosphere that seemed to permeate the air around the hospital. As he began his nightly rounds, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. He wandered the empty halls, the soft hum of fluorescent lights and the distant beeping of medical equipment his only company. A sense of unease grew with each passing moment, as though something terrible was just beyond his vision. Hidden in the shadows, one night, as Jack patrolled the dimly lit corridors, he came across a patient, an old man named Edward, who spoke of monstrous, unseen entities that preyed on the hospital's vulnerable patients. He claimed they were spirits, malevolent beings that fed on fear and pain. Jack dismissed the man's ramblings as the result of a troubled mind, but he couldn't deny the growing dread that tightened its grip on his chest. As the nights wore on, the sinister presence in the hospital grew more oppressive, and the patients became increasingly agitated. Their terrified whispers echoed through the halls, speaking of nightmarish creatures that stalked the shadows. Even the hospital staff began to show signs of fear, their faces pale and drawn. In the darkest hours of the night, Jack finally glimpsed the truth. He caught sight of a hulking, twisted figure lurking in the corner of a patient's room, its distorted form only visible in the reflection of the window. He realized to his horror that the monstrous entities were real, and they were growing stronger. Determined to protect the helpless patients, Jack devised a plan to confront the unseen forces that haunted the hospital. Armed with a mixture of salt, iron, and sage, he began to cleanse each room, driving the malevolent spirits back into the shadows from which they had emerged. The hospital's atmosphere lightened as Jack battled the supernatural forces, but he knew that his victory would be short-lived. The entities were relentless, regrouping and attacking with renewed ferocity each night. He was locked in a desperate struggle for the lives of the patients and his own survival. As the weeks went by, Jack grew weary from the constant battle. His body ached, and his spirit waned, but he refused to give up. He knew that he was the last line of defense for the hospital's patients, and he was determined to keep them safe from the unseen horrors that threatened them. In the end, it was the strength of Jack's resolve that turned the tide. The monstrous entities, sensing his unwavering determination, began to weaken. With each passing night, their attacks grew less frequent and their hold on the hospital loosened. Finally, one fateful night, Jack stood alone in the heart of the hospital, surrounded by the lingering spirits. As he stared down the unseen forces, he felt a surge of power within him, fueled by the gratitude and hope of the patients he had protected. With a defiant roar, he unleashed a wave of energy that swept through the building, banishing the malevolent entities once and for all. The hospital, now free from the darkness that had plagued it, returned to its role as a sanctuary for the people of Willowbrook. The patients and staff spoke of the Night Watchman with reverence and gratitude, whispering tales of his bravery and selflessness in hushed tones. But Jack continued to patrol the corridors, his once heavy heart now filled with a sense of purpose and accomplishment. The town of Willowbrook slowly began to heal from the scars left by the nightmarish events, its residents finding solace in the knowledge that the hospital was now a haven of safety. The unexplained disappearances ceased and life returned to a semblance of normalcy. As for Jack, he had become more than just a night watchman. He was a guardian, a protector of the vulnerable, and a sentinel against the unseen forces that sought to prey on the innocent. His name became synonymous with hope and security, and his story was passed down through generations, a testament to the power of courage and determination in the face of darkness. Though Jack knew that there would always be shadows lurking in the corners of the world, waiting to strike, he remained vigilant, his spirit strengthened by the knowledge that he had faced the worst of humanity's nightmares and emerged victorious. And so the Night Watchman walked his eternal beat, a lone figure patrolling the halls of the hospital, his unseeing eyes always watching, always ready to stand against the darkness and defend the lives of those who could not defend themselves. Whispers in the dark, the Night Watchman's reckoning. In the small, isolated town of Ravenswood, the air was thick with an unspoken dread. The townspeople spoke in hushed whispers, casting nervous glances at the centuries-old graveyard that rested on the outskirts of their community. It was said the dead did not rest easy there, and that the graveyard was home to a malevolent force that preyed upon the souls of the living. When the town council assigned Sam, the Night Watchman, to patrol the desolate graveyard, he accepted the task with a stoic determination. He had always considered himself a rational man, unswayed by the superstitious beliefs that gripped the townspeople. But as he walked the moonlit paths between the ancient tombstones, he couldn't ignore the unsettling sensation that something was watching him from the shadows. As the nights wore on, Sam began to hear chilling whispers in the darkness, voices that seemed to rise from the very graves themselves. At first, he dismissed the eerie sounds as nothing more than the wind or his imagination playing tricks on him. But as the whispers grew louder and more insistent, he could no longer deny that the graveyard was indeed haunted by the restless spirits of the dead. The whispers soon gave way to horrifying visions, specters of death and destruction that seemed to foreshadow a terrible fate for the town of Ravenswood. Determined to protect his town and its people, Sam set out to decipher the cryptic messages hidden within the whispers and the visions. He spent countless hours poring over old tomes and manuscripts, seeking answers in the forgotten lore of the town's past. His search led him to the legend of a vengeful spirit, a malevolent entity that had been imprisoned within the graveyard centuries ago. According to the legend, the spirit could only be released and banished once and for all by a ritual that required the strength and courage of a pure-hearted soul. Sam knew that he was the only one who could confront the supernatural entity and save the town from its gruesome fate. As the night of the ritual approached, Sam steeled himself for the battle ahead. Armed with the knowledge he had gleaned from the ancient texts and guided by the whispers of the long dead, he ventured into the heart of the graveyard. The air crackled with an otherworldly energy, and the ground beneath him seemed to tremble with anticipation. At the stroke of midnight, Sam began the ritual, his voice rising above the howling wind as he recited the ancient incantations. The spirits of the graveyard swirled around him, their unearthly whispers growing louder and more frantic. The malevolent force stirred, its dark presence looming over Sam as it struggled to break free of its prison. With a final, desperate cry, Sam completed the ritual, and the air erupted with a blinding flash of light. The spirits that had once haunted the graveyard were released, their whispered voices fading into the darkness as they found peace at last. The malevolent entity, bound by the power of the ritual, was banished to the void. Its reign of terror brought to an end. As dawn broke over Ravenswood, the town awoke to find that the dark cloud of fear that had once hung over them had vanished. The graveyard, once a place of dread and sorrow, was now bathed in the warm, golden light of the morning sun. Sam, the Night Watchman, had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. His courage and determination had saved the town from a terrible fate, and the people of Ravenswood would never forget his sacrifice. They spoke of him with reverence and gratitude, and his story was passed down through the generations as a testament to the power of bravery and resilience in the face of unspeakable evil. And the once fearful residents now visited the graveyard with a newfound sense of peace, tending to the graves of their ancestors and honoring the memories of those who had come before. The whispers in the dark had been silenced, and the sinister force that had once sought to destroy them was no more. Sam continued his duties as the Night Watchman, his spirit strengthened by the knowledge that he had not only saved his town but had also laid to rest the restless souls that had haunted the graveyard for centuries. His nights were no longer filled with terror and despair, but with a quiet calm, a serene stillness that settled over the town like a protective blanket. As the years went by, Sam became a symbol of hope and security for the people of Ravenswood. The town flourished, its residents no longer living in the shadow of the malevolent force that had once threatened their very existence. They knew that as long as the Night Watchman walked the graveyard's paths, they were safe from the darkness that had once consumed them. And so the Sam's legacy lived on, a beacon of light in a world filled with shadows. The Night Watchman's reckoning had come and gone, and the town of Ravenswood had emerged strong, a testament to the indomitable spirit of the human heart in the face of unspeakable terror. The relenting pursuit of the Night Watchman. In the quaint town of Greystone, nestled between the jagged cliffs and the unforgiving sea, a sense of unease had settled like a heavy fog. The townspeople spoke in hushed tones, fear lurking behind their eyes as they shared tales of a spectral hunter that prowled the shadows, seeking vengeance for a crime long buried in the town's dark past. James, the Night Watchman, had heard the whispers but dismissed them as little more than local folklore. He took pride in his work, patrolling the town and ensuring the safety of its residents. However, as he walked the deserted streets, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, an icy presence always lurking just behind his ears. One fateful night, as James made his rounds, the spectral hunter emerged from the shadows, its hollow gaze locked on its prey. The figure was tall and skeletal, clad in tattered rags that fluttered like the wings of a vengeful angel. Its eyes burned with a cold, relentless fury that chilled James to the bone. As the supernatural predator closed in, James found himself in a desperate game of cat and mouse. He was forced to confront not only the ruthless spirit, but also the growing sense of guilt that gnawed at his soul. For, as he would soon discover, the hunter was no mere ghost, but a vengeful spirit seeking justice for an unspeakable crime committed long ago. With time running out, James delved into the town's dark history, searching for the truth behind the hunter's relentless pursuit. He combed through dusty records and interrogated the town's oldest residents, unearthing a sinister tale of betrayal and bloodshed. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, James was forced to confront a terrible truth. The crime at the heart of the hunter's vengeance was one in which he himself had played a part. But fueled by a desperate need for redemption, James resolved to right the wrongs of his past and lay the vengeful spirit to rest. He tracked the hunter to the abandoned lights on the edge of town, where the darkness of the past still lingered like a poisonous fog. As the wind howled and waves crashed against the cliffs below, James climbed the spiral staircase, each step bringing him closer to his final confrontation with the spectral hunter. At the summit of the lights, the hunter awaited, its spectral form flickering like a ghostly flame. James faced the spirit, his heart heavy with the weight of his guilt, and spoke the truth that had long been buried, that he too was responsible for the crime that had set the hunter on its path of vengeance. The air grew thick with tension as James awaited the hunter's response, wondering if his confession would be enough to quell the spirit's rage. But to his surprise, the hunter's gaze softened and its ghostly form began to dissipate. The fury that had fueled its relentless pursuit finally appeased. As the spectral hunter vanished into the night, James felt the weight of his guilt lift from his shoulders. He had faced the darkness of his own past and found a chance at redemption. Though the road to forgiveness would be long and fraught with obstacles, James vowed to walk it, no matter the cost. In the wake of the hunter's unrelenting pursuit, the town of Greystone was forever changed. The townspeople no longer lived in fear, and the shadows that had once haunted their dreams had been banished and replaced by a renewed sense of hope. And as for James, the Night Watchman, he continued his rounds, a guardian of the town and a sentinel against the darkness, forever vigilant against the ghosts of the past.